Hey guys, this is Robin again from Rupsa Academy. So if you guys have been following my channel, my sessions, these are all targeted to a very specific topic that we discuss um, in every session. Um, and I wanted to make it very short as well so that you can go through the video quickly to get to know about it, to broaden your knowledge about it, or to find different areas that you can go around to gain more knowledge around those topic. So this time I wanted to focus on how to explain at the enterprise level, the overall project kind of eagle eye view, and connect that with the software development process, and then bring it all the way down to software testing process. As a QA, you want to highlight, or how you are going to make that connection from the testing side of the world all the way up to the enterprise, and how does it work together in present IT industry. So that's the kind of connection I wanted to build, so that when you talk about this stuff to any kind of audience, you have a good amount of information that relates to the project itself, and that speaks the amount of exposure experience that you have working in the IT industry for whatever number of years. So it's a good knowledge to have in back of your mind, so that every your daily activity you can enhance the way you can present yourself, as well as talking about all of these areas, which is very crucial as a QA analyst. To again, what kind of or whatever kind of audience, either that is interview, or you are trying to provide some knowledge transfers, or you are trying to bring some new hire up to the speed, telling them about or explaining them the project structure, and the overall testing processes, kind of the overall structure that you want to explain to whoever, right? So again, not restricted to interview. I know we have been talking about interview processes for some time in some of the recordings, but this time I wanted to talk about kind of an overall picture, whichever the scenario you will be at. So at this point, right, so if you have not subscribed to my channel, feel free to do so. Like, feedback, comment, right, so whatever you want to, definitely do so. That helps me to come with more content, and also specify what topic you want me to explain. Probably we can do a separate session and cover those topics as well, right? So definitely give me feedback in whatever ways and format. So without delaying furthermore, let's jump right into our topic. So enterprise, right? Again, everything happens under the hood of that enterprise. Multiple projects might be happening into that enterprise following the software development process and software testing process, where we want to make sure these applications, which is part of that enterprise, of multiple applications that makes up that enterprise, coming from various different projects, they are working in sync, they are working hand in hand, and they have quality, so that it does not break, fail, or does not create a havoc once it hits the production, right? So that kind of the areas that we wanted to talk. So let's jump into our first screen. So the overall architecture, right? So if we talk about enterprise, definitely we want to know the structure about it. Now, as a business, as a quality analyst, probably we might be talking about, why do I need to know all of these, or why do I need to know how does the enterprise look like, or how does they function? The answer is, you are since you will be working as a part of the enterprise, it brings an advantage that what is the overall structure, where am I, and how does that impact the overall company process, right? Becomes very, very crucial. At the same time, um, it also helps you to understand what is the amount of effort required for that project to end, to complete, and the effort that you're trying to put in, how does that help in whatever format to make sure that these applications coming out from various different projects is helping or hurting enterprise in whatever way. So it gives you a very better viewpoint that whatever you do, why we are doing so, and what is the advantage of doing that, and if done wrongly or not appropriately, what kind of damage does it bring in? So if you look at the different levels of enterprise, we are looking at strategic level, right? So operations level and implementation level. So if you put yourself as a quality analyst, right? Again, we are mostly focused on that area. We kind of putting ourselves into that operations level, right? So where our job, our target is to make sure that operations or whatever product that comes out of that operation has the quality that is supposed to have, so that when it gets implemented, we have less problem. And what kind of strategic discussion that has already been done for us to get down to that operations level, right? So equally important, right? So if the strategies, right, if there's a problem in a strategic level, that will sip through, and we'll see more problems in the implementation phase of it, right? Or if there's situations in operations level and things got shipped out, then definitely we'll have a problem in implementation level, or the operations did not follow exactly what the strategy level came up with, right? So whatever, so these three levels has to work in a sync. That's why, right? So again, it's a top down, which is not really it's just to showcase it, but there are different ways to achieve this structure. So overall, what we are talking about here is strategy, and the rules and the bullet points that comes out from strategy is very important for operations, right? Because we need to know that guidelines, what is and what is not, and what is needed and what is not needed, or what is good and what is bad, right? So all of these kind of highlights is required. And then the implementation, right? So where we are showcasing to our customer or our end client that, okay, this is what we have, and this is how you can approach into the company or use the platform provided by the company for whatever reason, or whatever for whatever they want to achieve. Now, in addition to that, for the enterprise to function, there are different tier that is required for its proper functionality, right? So technology being a very important, right, so part of it, right? And various different kind of applications or very different ways or different types of application that helps end client, whatever kind of end client, be able to use those technology so that they can do business, or they can use that platform for whatever that platform is meant for. Data, right? So again, everything data, right? What data we are looking for, what data that we are collecting, and what data is required, and the business side of it. What is the business value of it, right? So enterprise definitely needs to talk about what kind of business it is doing, what kind of data it is handling, and through what kind of application or whatever number of applications that it is providing for end user to interact, and then what kind of technology that is going behind all of these to back it up, right? So the overall structure of enterprise, or the architectural structure of enterprise, is very crucial for that enterprise to be successful in whatever business they are targeting to achieve, and whatever solutions they are trying to provide. So very, very crucial, right? So again, for us, looking at these, we should be able to understand where we at, and how crucial that role is at, and what kind of phases the work that we put in passes through or traverse through. Now, a little bit about project management, right? So, multiple, like we discussed earlier, the enterprise is the overall governing body that will define the business. And for that business to happen, it has to provide multiple solutions. And those solutions cannot be developed by one team, one group, right? It has to be separated out, because they have a different, right? So it is different solutions, and every solutions will need a different approach to different group of individual, and a more isolation from one to another, so that we can create dependency when we need it, and we can isolate them when it has to be isolated, so that development can go in a different phase, and also integration can happen when needed. So for every solutions, it will go towards a different, it has to be separate as a different project. So the managing that project becomes very, very crucial. That's why project management role, right? So it's very, it's kind of getting tons of attractions, right? Where every project has to be managed, so that we can see what's going on, or is it doing well? Is it going as per the schedule, under the whatever budget that is defined, and whatever is supposed to achieve, right? Is it achieving that goals or not? So all that needs to be managed, and has to be managed separately. So in an enterprise, there might be tons of project that is going in parallel, and at some point of the time, they might cross path. So we need to understand what project we are involved in, right? So inside out of it, and what are other projects that is happening in parallel that might cross path to our project at some point, or what are other projects that we need to support while being part or working in the project that you're assigned to. So this kind of visibility becomes very, very crucial. Now, as part of project, right? So the project has its own process, right? It goes through own process, where we talk about every project definitely needs some process, and these are 5 phases that we talk about. The initiation of project, or identification of project, again, it cannot be random, right? We need to identify what solutions that project is going to bring in. So for that solution, we need to define what kind of objective it is trying to achieve, right? So what kind of effort is required, what is the scope of it, and what kind of budget are we looking at, right? And the prioritization or priority of that project, what kind of schedulings, and all tons of other information, right? So we need to identify that, so that we can initiate the project, right? So project will only start once these things are defined, or the initiation of project means these kind of things that is all that is defined, or that is in the process of defining. Once these things are defined, then comes the planning of it, right? So which will provide the confirmation and validation of what our objectives are, right? So what is in scope and not what not, right? What is the advantage of this project, right? And what can be the risk, right? So what we might be dependent on, right? Or it can be some other project or data or whatever, right? And who will authorize for us to start the activity, or who can be the signing body, or who can be the person who signs off, right? And the planning, right? So planning in terms of what are the number of resources that we need, right? The budget, right? What is the schedules that we are looking at? What is our aim? When to finish, when to start, when to finish, right? Or at what point of time, what we are trying to achieve, right? So probably different schedules. Then execution of the project, where we need to showcase what is actually done, and what effort was required to finish that amount of activity, right? Or what kind of issue are we facing, right? And any other effort, right? Or do we need to review it, right? So we definitely need to look into it and see what we achieved versus what was our plan, right? And then closure of the project once we uh, reach our project goal, and uh, once we discuss about all the implementation, right? Implementation, what the post implementation report, um, and whatever lesson learned, right? Again, it can be one project ended, or there might be one phase of that project ended, or one section, right? So one cycle of that project ended. There might be furthering of that project, or probably project turning into some different form, right? So whatever the situation is, right? So definitely a project needs to go into closure with whatever lesson learned, right? And what goal was planned and what we achieved, and the report for the post implementation, right? So how is it going, right? In terms of data that we want to collect. So these are the phases that project has to go through. And again, right, so being part of that project, you definitely want to understand, because these are very, very important for us to define our role. Whatever our role is, right? So either you are working as a production support member, or you're working as a development member, or testing member, or DevOps, or business analyst, or whatever, right? Uh, you want to know what that project is all about, and what is its goal, and what are the deliverables that we are looking at, or once the project is over, right? So what kind of problem that we face, and what kind of lesson that we learn. Now comes the STLC, SDLC, right? So it's always a big fight, that what is STLC, what is STLC, and what one against another, or what is it, right? So definitely you already know it's software development lifecycle, software testing lifecycle, and to keep it very simple, right? So software development lifecycle is the overall process where we are talking about development of an software. Software testing lifecycle, where we are focused on the testing activity to signing off the quality of that application, right? And what process or what phases do we go through? So let's look at the software development lifecycle first, so that we can jump into software testing lifecycle and check out what uh, check out the contrast between these two. Okay. So 6 phases again, right? So if you go through different document, different places, you might get a lot of different information about what are the different phases of software development lifecycle, and uh, nothing major to memorize the specific name of the phase, right? So the overall idea is, what are the process we have to go through, right? The very first process, right? The analysis, right? So analysis, where we are talking about what are the information that we need, right? We might be talking about planning as well, right? So planning, analysis, right? So what are the information do we need, right? For that project, or for that software to be developed at the end of the process, right? So what kind of information do we need to gather? Now, individual who is responsible to do that: product owner, product manager, right? So business analyst, right? So technical ops, right? So all of these people will work to gather information by analyzing what business, what software are we trying to develop, and what kind of details do we need to make sure that we understand how we want, or what kind of solutions do we want to provide with that software. once that is done, then we are moving into the phase what we call design, right? So now we cannot just say, okay, we have all the information now, let's start development, right? So we need to design how it's supposed to look like, right? Or when the end customer uses that application, how is it supposed to look like, or what kind of flow it's supposed to have, right? So this kind of thing needs to be defined, which will be done by the architect or designers, right? Will design how does the application look like, where things will go in terms of what kind of features will have what kind of flow, and how does that feature look like overall, right? So those kind of designing has to be done in detail, right? And whatever analyzed from the business point of view has to be approved. Obviously, what kind of design was developed by the architect designer has to be approved as well, so that they kind of become final. Then goes towards the development. Again, development will happen in lots of different groups, lots of different aspects. Now, here comes the development of the application that faces the end customer, or front end application, or the application that deals with the database, or it's a backend application. Now, in that also we can divide into multiple different, where we are talking about in the mic application that is following the next gen kind of structure, right? So where we are talking about microservices. Now, in that kind of situation, we'll have some application that will be front end, some application that will act as a middleware, and some application that will be acting as a microservices, right? The microservices layer, and the backend application, then the database, right? Which needs to be developed as well. So different group focusing on different kind of development and different sides of development, right? Now, based on that development, right? So every development effort needs to be tested. Every development effort needs to be quality checked in various level. We'll talk about that in a bit. So testing, right? So after development is done, goes to the testing again, not solely, right? Again, in a broken pieces, we'll talk about it, and we have talked about it in different recordings as well, right? So and there might be different individual who works in that testing phase. Some might be more focused towards the environment, testing the environment, right? So kind of DevOps kind of individual. Some might be working in the environmental, right? So test environment setup, more towards the automation probably, right? So or manual testing, right? Lots of different kinds of testing that goes around. Probably the functional testing, right? The non-functional testing, right? The integration, right? So or acceptance testing, right? So tons of different kind of testing activity will be going on. So there will be different kind of testing that will happen in the testing phase. And once good enough, right? So then we'll go through the deployment phase, where again DevOps team, right? The production support team, right? So they will be working along to make sure that application that is thoroughly tested is deployed in pre-production or production environment. Then once it is available to the customer, then we can start maintaining that application or monitoring that application, which will be done by the production support team, which might include some testing, some support management team, right? So involved to make sure that things are working fine, or if something goes off, then they will capture it, and they'll notify to the development team, and that can be reported as the production issues, fixed it, and then goes to the testing process and deployed back. So this becomes the overall software development lifecycle, which gets followed almost in every project, where we are talking about breaking it apart into multiple different phases and making sure we are going through phase to phase, either in a waterfall model or the agile model, right? So different ways of accepting it or achieving it. Now, software development lifecycle. Now, this is a more broken down pieces what we discussed just now, right? So where we are talking more on the initiation of the project, planning it, analyzing it, right? So up to where we are talking about more on the business side, where what kind of project, right? So defining the project, right? So evaluating that, planning it, budgeting it, right? So all that, and then capturing the information for that project, for that application, and creating a business specification, business requirement, and based on that business requirement, working with the designer, right? So designer folks, architecture, to make sure that it gets designed so that we have a proper design on our hand to look into it. And the development team looking at the design, looking at the business specification, they'll define the technical specifications of it, right? Then becomes the development of it, right? So we need to develop, we need to construct it. Now, once that is done, then comes the testing part of it, where we want to test it in a different level, right? So test the code, test the individual component, test the component, keeping it together as part of integration, test the component from the acceptance point of view, right? So customer acceptance point of view as a UAT, right? So done by stakeholders or some UAT testers, right? Then implementing that, right? So verifying it, some customer verification by doing some the small pilot, right? Then going into the full scale, and then monitoring it, tracking it, and doing the post implementation report, right? And that ends. And once the whole cycle is done, again, if you see the arrow pointing left and right, that means this process keeps on going over and over again. It's a non-stop process, but the majority of work might be done once we have completed the overall activity that was planned. Then once we are in that implementation phase, then we are just capturing the feedback reports in the production, and based on that, we are doing the software development, whatever process that needs, right? So either debugging it, fixing it, testing it again, and then implementing that, right? So that kind of process goes over and over again, right? So here the major things that we want to understand is the terminologies might be different, but the overall process that gets followed for the development of software is kind of consistent, right? Where we are talking about what are the things that we need to start, what are the things that we need as part of planning, and what are the things that we'll be collecting as part of analysis, and then designing it out and developing it out and testing it out, then implementing and post implementation. Now, through this process, right, so there will be things that will be documented. There will be things that needs to be approved. Then the things will go forward, right? So if you see the color differences, that is what we are talking about as well, right? So all the project plan, right? So budget, all those kind of document needs to be approved. Business specification that needs to be approved. Technical specification that gets created, either that design document or whatever other document, right? So that needs to be approved. Then the code needs to be checked out, right? So the testing activity that was done needs to be checked out, right? So approved, so that the user acceptance can be tested, that can be checked out as well, approved as well. Then only it will be implemented, and the pilot verification, right, or customer verification that will happen in a small pilot data gets approved as well, and it goes into the full scale, right? So different phases it's going through, different documentations that it gets created in the process, and different kind of approval it has to go through. Now, software testing lifecycle, right? Inside the software development lifecycle is where the testing phase is, but instead of looking at testing phase only as part of testing is kind of not enough, right? Or kind of a very small picture of it, and we want to scale it up. We want to make it better, because quality is utmost important for whatever application, whatever project, whatever enterprise, and whatever company. So for that, right, so we want to make sure that the testing activity is also done in a proper way, or has to go through specific phases to make sure that it is enough, it is adequate, and it is capturing what is supposed to capture, and it is checking the quality of what is supposed to check, right? So that when we come to the other end of the testing life cycle, towards the closer of software development life cycle, we are kind of satisfied looking at the product that got delivered. Now, if you break down the phases of software testing lifecycle, it goes along kind of side by side with the software development lifecycle, though the things will be looked into the different ways, right? So the first, we saw about the analysis earlier. Now here for software testing lifecycle, we are talking about whatever requirement that was created, or whatever requirement document that was created or that was provided by the business team. We need to have some session or some discussion around it for the proper analysis of it. So development team needs to know what is that requirement, or what does that what are the details about that requirement, so that we are all in the same page, we understand what's going on there. Based on that requirement understanding is where our planning, right? So we want to plan our testing. Plan in the sense that what kind of testing is required, right? And what does the timeline look like? What are the resources that we need to have to make sure that we finish our testing properly? And when are we going to begin, or when the testing is going to start, right? Or when and what kind of testing effort is required, right? So what kind of different modality of the testing is needed for us to finish that, and when can we start, and when can we say we are done with the testing? All that needs to be planned, right? And has to be documented, right? So test plan document. The test case development. Now comes the test case writing, right? So we need to create the scenarios, right? The positive scenario, negative scenario, whatever scenarios that we can come up with, looking at those requirements, right? So whatever testing we need to do for whatever requirement that comes in our hand, we need to make sure that it has enough amount of test cases that checks the quality of that feature from every direction. Now, without the environment setup, obviously the testing cannot happen. So for us to execute our test case, we need to have a environment set. Now, who is going to be involved for that environment set, right? So we need to involve them. What kind of data that is needed for us to do our test execution, that becomes part of our environment set as well. So we need to make sure that we have good data for our testing. We have an environment where the application is deployed, or whatever number of application is deployed, and it is having connection with whatever other application on the back end, so that when we start our testing with whatever test cases that we have developed based on the requirement analysis and test plan that we did, now we can start the execution of it. Now, when we start execution, obviously, it will be optimal if you don't find anything. But obviously, that's not the case. We'll find the problem, and that's the whole point. We need to find the problem in the testing phase itself. So while executing test cases, we'll find problems, right? So we raise it as a defect, right? And then we initiate the defect cycle, defect life cycle, and that defect needs to be fixed. So that defect that we have, that defect that we report, definitely has to be reported to the development team, and that has to be tracked as well, so that we know what kind of defects were raised and who is working on it, and when we are expecting the fix, so that in which version of that code can we test that defect again, or can we test that provided fix again, so that we can go to the closure of that defect and continue the test execution. Once everything is settled, everything is good, then comes the closer, right? The test cycle closer, where we are talking about what kind of check mark do we need to do regarding closing our test execution or testing cycle, right? What kind of result report do we need to submit, right? So as a exit report, right? So that we can exit out from that from that testing phase, submit that exit report as a satisfaction from the testing side of it regarding the quality of that feature, that requirement that we tested, and then get it signed off, right? So that we can say this is done, this is good, right? So at least for now. So very, very crucial for us to understand the processes so that we don't go back and forth. We follow some sequence, and also while that is going on, we are documenting things properly. We are creating proper documentation so that the audit, right? So everything gets audited. So we need to make sure that we have everything tracked, right? So traceability done, a report created, submitted, plan created, submitted, approved, so that we have everything in place in terms of the software testing side of the activity was properly carried upon. And now putting it all together, like we mentioned, side by side, if you look at the phases, they kind of resemble between the software development lifecycle, software testing life. Not really a fight, but it is just to make sure that we understand them side by side and understand the value of each of them, right? So requirement, if we look at the software development lifecycle, we are talking about requirement collection, right? So the product analyst, business analyst, right? So this kind of individual will be working into it, right? Whereas on the software testing lifecycle, we are talking about requirement analysis, right? Then from the requirement gathering, right? So we are going into the planning, right? Whereas in software testing lifecycle, we are talking about planning of test, right? So test plan for the release or for the cycle, all right? So for whatever features that we will be testing, right? In that cycle, right? So designing, we are talking designing of test cases, whereas in designing we're talking about high level design models, right? Detailed models, right? So that everybody can look into it. How it's supposed to look like, right? Now developing, right? So whereas in testing lifecycle we are talking about, right, so coding as the development and development lifecycle, whereas developing test cases, right? So identifying all the possible test scenarios, writing the test cases, making sure that we review those test cases, right? And any problem or any issues with those test cases, we fix it. Or if the test cases are not enough, we increase it, right? And make sure that that all the test cases are approved, and then we store it in our in our repository or in our cycle, right? As a test case repositories or as a test case artifact, right? Then once the testing phase comes in the software development lifecycle, that's where we are talking about test execution, right? And the test execution, right? So finding of defect and the cycle of defect fix, then executing it, retesting it, and then once the satisfaction or if the tester is satisfied, we're moving forward, right? And closure of that defect, where closure of that testing life cycle, we were talking about pushing it forward to the implementation maintenance. Here we are talking about providing the test exit report, right? So and getting it approved, and then learn from the mistake, right? So that's exactly what we do with post maintenance here, talking about retrospective meeting to look back and understand what went well, what went bad, and whatever the scope of improvement that we have. Now, breaking it down again, right? So different levels of testing that we go through, right? So kind of we start from the unit testing, then integration testing, system testing, and acceptance testing, like we mentioned earlier, right? So the different feature testing team might be working in the development of whatever feature, whatever's needed for that feature, right? Or whatever side of that feature being developed, front end, middleware, microservices, backend, whatever, right? So whatever is needed, that development goes through that sprint cycle, goes in that sprint cycle, and whatever comes out from the development will be tested as part of unit testing. And once they are kind of good, right? So we'll put them together as a feature, then the functional testing will happen, and all of these features will be put together as a as a system, right? And the system integration testing or SIT testing will happen, and then user acceptance testing, right? So from the user acceptance point of view, we'll do a UAT testing, and once the UAT testing team is satisfied, then the release will be signed up and ready to go forward or ready to be implemented if that is what we want to implement, right? So these are the flow that we go through from the unit testing to integration testing to system testing and acceptance testing, so that we can enhance the amount of testing that goes in every code or every feature or every version of that software that gets developed. It has to go through a rigorous amount of testing at different level so that we can increase the amount of comfortness regarding the application that we are delivering to the end customer, right? So overall, these are the areas that we want to have our eyes on, and we want to make sure that we visualize it in the project. We have this as part of our explanation. Again, like I mentioned in the earlier phase of our session, that whatever the audience is, or whoever our audience is, we want to make sure that these things are explained and we have visibility of it, and which makes our work even better and more productive. Discussion becomes more productive, and increases your satisfaction level of what you are doing as a quality analyst, or in fact anybody, or any role that you are playing in that project. It creates that satisfaction that, okay, you are part of that bigger enterprise where the solutions are being developed, and the role that you have in that project is very important for that the proper conclusion or closure of that project, right? And whenever we face issues, then we also know what kind of individual needs to be involved for the resolution of it, and then we can move into that direction, right? Now, kind of a very concise but tons of information. So I want you guys to uh, provide me any feedback regarding whatever the explanation of this enterprise, right? From the enterprise level to project to software testing lifecycle, software development lifecycle. If that helps you to make this understanding better, and also give me hit me if this help you in your or help you to clarify certain areas that you're struggling, and helping you to move forward into interview processes or your learning processes. Ping me, right? So provide your feedback so that we can discuss for the other topic next time. Okay. And thanks again, right? So, and keep going through, keep learning, and we'll see next for a different other topic. Thank you. Again, this is Robin from Roofsa Academy. Take care. Bye.